is because our aggregate indebtedness number could rise dramatically because whatever Facebook stock we don't sell, right? Does it go to stock heaven? Is it up there with the puppies?
You have it in inventory now.
There you go. And the haircut from an inventory position from a firm commitment underwriting is 30%. Right. So if we
Yep.
end up putting 10 million of this $10 million into inventory, it's going to be carried on the books as 7 million in net capital. Now, I'm not going to make you on your 24. As you know, you've been into the cave to slay the dragon a couple of times. You got a good look at him. Not
Yep.
such good a look the first time. Second time, you kind of got a good eyeball on him. You'll get him this next time, but you're not supposed to be taking haircuts anyways because that's somebody else's job. Stay in your lane, so to speak. But you should have a general understanding of that. Now, I, as the manager, have the exclusive contract with this issuer. You cannot get this stock without coming through moi. Good. Now, we're not going to tell investors how we're going to split up this money because, the spread that I'm showing you here, because that would just cloud their mind. But on the front page of every prospectus, we do show you the net proceeds to the issuer on a per share basis, and we show you the public offering price, and we show you that spread. We show it to you per share, and we show it to you in aggregate.
So it would show what the total aggregate amount to Facebook
Yep.
was
Yeah,
when we bought it at
that's
38.
right. In fact, I'm just made up 100 million. I'm just showing it to you now. So
Yeah.
let's look at this right there's boom. There's our deal. Boom. And then, as I said, I'm also going to show you to you on the front page of the prospectus in aggregate. So I'm going to tell you the net proceeds in the deal we're working on is 92 million. My friends and I are going to make 8 million. Again, we're not going to tell you how we split that up because that's none of your damn business. And
Right.
that would just cloud your mind. And so that would be on the front page of every prospectus. Besides that, the other big thing that's on the front page of the prospectus is that the SEC neither approves nor disapproves of any securities offering. They neither pass upon the adequacy or the accuracy of the information contained herein. Any
Right.
claim to the contrary is a criminal offense. Now, as a manager, I say you can take down stock at 9:30. So we're talking about components of the spread. So there's two things we want to have a handle on as it relates to this. We want to know compensation, components of the spread, and we want to know participants. And so that's what we're looking at here. And so here, it doesn't matter who sells the stock. I, as the manager, make 10 cents on every share sold. That is my management fee. Now, I'm going to keep some of the stock myself. And so on that, the only person who can capture the entire spread is the manager. Right? I'm going to keep
Right.
stock myself. That is the smallest individual component of the spread. Now, you have to decide, do you want to build your own bracket? So your UBS, you can get stock from me at 9:30 from the syndicate. Do you want to sell it through UBS's own distribution network and make, in this case, 70 cents? Or do you want
Right.
your own bracket? I say, Heath, you might want to call Schwab. I asked Schwab to join our syndicate as a syndicate member, and they said they were uncomfortable with liability. And so they said they certainly have customers who want to buy this stock. Why don't you, Heath, if you want some help, call them and put them in your bracket? Why don't you build your selling group? If you build your selling group, you'll be able to sell more shares. And so you say, well, I think I will do that. I say, okay, cool. So on the shares that Schwab sells, you're going to sign up Schwab. You're going to make 20 cents. And that is the underwriting concession or underwriter fee, however you want to think about that.
Yeah.
Here, The 50 cents test question is a selling concession, and it's very testable to know that you are not liable for unsold securities as a selling group member. So if all you make is that 50 cents, you are not at risk for unsold securities, right? Because you're a selling group. Or selling group members are not members of the syndicate. Now, my Facebook example, UBS was were primarily responsible for, the stock that came unstuck. And they said, oh, well, our selling group let us down. And I go, well, that sounds like a personal problem. So syndicate members have liability, uh, syndicate members, not selling group members. Now, that's important because when I ask you, how many do you want to take down? So we're doing 10 million shares here at 10. And I said,
Right.
how many shares do you want to take down? You might want to ask me, well, Dean, what kind of syndicate is this? Is this, Dean, a Western
Or
divided syndicate?
yeah. Or Eastern, right?
Right
Undivided.
on. So let's say you say, Dean, we will take down 20 million. Now, the firm come in underwriting, I kind of the way I think it is what goes down stays down. If you tell me you're going to do 20 million in a divided Western syndicate, well, by God, that's what you're going to do. So,
Yep.
you might want to have that in mind when you tell me you're going to do this. Now, let's do that one first, divide it. Or Western. When I think of Western, I think of John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Mono Mono.
Yeah, no
We
doubt.
do this, the things on this side of the Rockies a little different, right? And so I call you and I say, hey, Heath, Dean here. I've checked in with all the other syndicate members. They've all sold what they took down. How you doing at UBS? And you say, well, Dean, I go, Heath, you got a mouse in your pocket? There is no we. We only did 10. I go, Heath, you didn't do 10, you did 20.
Hmm.
He said, well, what do you mean? I go, well, the 10 mo goes into your inventory, right? Attention broker
Right.
special. Now, if this was
Right.
an Eastern syndicate, again, very testable as a liability issue. If this was a Eastern syndicate, that's not important, undivided or Eastern. I always think Harvard, Yale, Princeton, we're always in it together. Mafia,
Mafia like that.
right?
Yeah, but
Oh, you're laughing, but
whatever's not sold there then would be distributed evenly amongst the
yeah, that's
remaining.
right again. Same thing, right? I call you and I say, Heath, I've checked in with all the other syndicate members. They've all sold their allocation.
Yep.
How you doing? You say, Dean, we've done 10. I go, well, you're not going to be very popular, Heath, because
Right.
now I'm going to reallocate it. You keep two, and
Yep.
reallocate the eight. And people are going to say, who did that? Or let's say I call you. I say, Heath, I've been checking in with syndicate members like yourself. How you doing? You say, Dean, we said we do 20. We did 20. We're done. I said, no, uh,
Right.
I'm doing reallocation right now. I had some very classy investment banker ladies, and they do public finance. And she said she thinks of it as like a family dinner. In an Eastern family dinner, we just keep passing around, but nobody leaves the table till it's done. Western family dinner, you just got to eat your own meal, and then you get to leave the table, so to speak. So I kind of
You
like
want
it.
to excuse yourself, right? Hey, I'm
Yeah,
done.
yeah, I like it. I like it. Now, in the Facebook underwriting, uh, it was again a problem. And Michael Grimes, the 24 in corporate finance in Silicon Valley, for Morgan Stanley, came out 2 days. You call me and say, Dean, it's 38. It's been at 38 the last couple of days. I said, well, Heath, I think they're probably stabilizing it. I mean, nobody's going to buy it at 38 if they can get in the secondary market at 20. My
Right.
guess is that the offering is being stabilized. I think of stabilization as kind of a legal form of pegging, if you will.
Yeah.
You catch you doing this any other place than a firm commitment underwriting, you're going to be in trouble. Now,
Is there a amount of time that you're allowed to keep that stabilizing bid?
no, it's not a testable timeline, but at some point we break syndicate.
Okay.
And so that's what Michael Grimes did. He came out 3 days. He said, we've been stabilizing the issue. We have spent $200 million of syndicate resources stabilizing. We're going to remove the stabilizing bid, and now it'll find its natural price. So a couple test questions about stabilization. We have only can do it in firm commitment underwriting.
Yep.
It has to be in the prospectus. It's better to have in the prospectus and not need it than need it and not have it. So as a matter
Right.
of routine, we're going to say we may stabilize the issue. Only one syndicate member can do it. That's called the stabilization agent. And very testable, it has to be at or below the public offering price. In our example, at 10 or below 10. In the Facebook example, at or below 38.
So let me read that bit here, what I got here on understanding that. So you can stabilize it for however you want, long you want, a couple of days, maybe
Yeah.
a week,
At some
whatever.
point,
And at some point, you're going to break that. You're going to break that.
that's called
And
breaking the syndicate.
you're going to actually go to market and see what people are willing to pay for it.
Yeah, well, I like it. Good point, by the way. Until I break syndicate, nobody can sell the stock for less than 10. We all as syndicate members have to honor the public offering price until we break syndicate. The
Right.
manager decides when to break syndicate. One other thing. Bankers are notorious for saying charge it to the deal. So before we split up the money, we have deal related expenses. And if you're UBS and I'm breaking syndicate, you want to know when you're going to get paid.
Yeah.
So I have to make a detailed list of syndicate expenses and pay you within 90 days of breaking syndicate. So
Okay.
once we break syndicate, then you know you're going to expect to be paid in 90 days. Now, I can have a category, so I have to provide syndicate members a detailed list of expenses. I can have a category called miscellaneous. The test question, if you ask me to break out the miscellaneous, you say, hey, Dean, what is this, paper clips or, then I have to say, oh, no problem. I'll break it out for you. Right. But this is not a good way to lose your position as a 24. I mean, sometimes you would think that the older guys and gals would have better judgment than the baby brokers, but, sometimes maybe not. These
Right.
guys had plenty of resources to do this on their bucket list to have a lunch, and it was a lunch that ended up costing over six figures because of the wines they started ordering.
Ooh.
They just went in, and then when they were getting the tab, this is where they get stupid. Instead of just saying, "Hey, I can take that off my bucket list," and they decided to charge it to the syndicate, charge it to the deal, and
Oh,
it gets worse. You get like, okay, well, that was the first bad decision, and then I get your expense report, and I say, "Hey, Heath, what's this $100,000?" And you say, "Oh, I was a roadshow, and I had invited some institutional investors in San Francisco to join me for lunch." I go, "Okay, Heath, so who was in attendance?" Right? And
yeah.
give me some names, and again, this just goes further and further south. And then I
Right.
called the guy you say was there, and I said, "Hey, I hear he took you to the roadshow lunch. How was it?" And you go, "Well, what are you talking about?" Hey, if I was a Danko, I would have known I was there. I know, I
Right.
I would think, "Hey, Heath, I just called a handful of these people." So,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. One thing I caught that you said was the stabilization of the price has to be in the prospectus.
Yes, you cannot stay. We can't if it's not in there. If we have not told investors that this issue may be pegged or manipulated. I'm joking, but this is
Right.
legal form of pegging that price at 38.
Yep.
That's the only time I'm going to be allowed to do that. We had a legendary guy, Hank Greenberg of AIG, and he had a stock buyback authorized. So his board had said, if our stock is undervalued, you can go ahead and buy it. And he called the specialist and he said, hey, listen, do whatever you got to do to keep AIG at 75 today. Now, good news, the specialist knew the rules, the designated market maker. He said, so you're asking me to peg your stock at 75. He goes, yeah,
Right.
whatever you got to do. He goes, well, I hate to break that to you, but that's a form of market manipulation. He goes, oh,
Yeah.
never mind. So at least he was lucky enough to somebody who knows
Right.
the rules, right? Uh,
Right.
okay, well, primary market is we have more obligations in the primary market than we do in the secondary market. I always think it's kind of like when you buy a car. If you buy new, there's more warranty kind of stuff than when you buy used.
Yep.
Now, these were companion pieces of legislation, right? And, under this 33, if we're not complying with 33, we're selling unregistered securities. And
Right.
whenever we're selling unregistered securities, we got to be really careful that we do it correctly. So there are some safe harbors available to us. If you ever ask an attorney, about a safe harbor for whatever. You're asking, how can you legally do what you want to do without getting into trouble? I
Right.
smoke cigars. My brother smokes pot, and he tells me he's allowed to have personal pot plants. I go, Chris, what is the de minimis for growing your own pot? And he goes, what de minimis? I go, well, yeah, that's Latin for, how many pot plant.
How much is too much, right?
Yeah, yeah, because I said, I can't imagine you can put in some greenhouses and start growing 10 acres of pot. He goes, oh, I get de minimis 3. I said, well, make sure, Chris, you stay within the safe harbor. Don't get the fourth one. It's not worth, having
Right.
to come out here and think you're a drug dealer or some crazy thing. Right. So
Right.
we have safe harbors. One thing we should know is that if we sell unregistered securities, they're restricted in terms of transfer.
Right. 6 months.
There you go. And, when the days when we had stock certificates, there would be a legend that says top transfer. And so sometimes we still refer to this stock as legend stock, assuming there's some public secondary market. We sometimes
Yeah.
refer to this as red letter stock, but you nailed the major point. There's a 6-month hold on that kind of stock. And then there's ways to do it, Reg D, Reg A, all that kind of stuff we'll be discussing. Secondary market, more caveat emptor. We have less obligations to clients that are buying stock in the secondary market. Makes sense. There's assumed to be some information available, research, things like that. So, I kind of think of that as the car
Yeah.
example.
I feel like that stuff right there, I have a really good grasp on,
Good,
like
good,
127, 144, Reg S, Reg D.
good, good,
Don't
good,
forget
good.
Reg
Okay,
A.
so
So,
we make our registration statement. The basic registration statement is an S1,
yep.
right? We use F6 for an American depository receipt.
Yep.
If a bank wants to sponsor an ADR, this is how they would do it. If it's a foreign private issuer, they would file 20F. Now, very testable. Once we make the registration statement, we enter into the cooling off period or quiet time, which is a
Yep.
minimum of 20 days. I have a test question for you. How does the preliminary prospectus, also known as a red herring, how does that differ from a final prospectus?
It does not have the final offering price.
Right on. That's the one that's testable. You got it. And
Yep.
I got another question for you. Based on the preliminary prospectus, we can accept indications of interest, IOIs. My
Right.
question to you is, are IOIs binding or non-binding?
They're non-binding.
Non-binding on all parties. Very
Yep.
testable.
Yep.
Oh, and a lot of people don't understand these rules, right? So we're not allowed
Yep.
to advertise the new issue. We can place a tombstone. If you see a tombstone, it usually has their birth date, when they died, says loving father, husband. For more complete information, see the obituary.
Right.
Ours tombstones are very similar.
Yep.
I couldn't believe I'm watching this guy on the Sunday New York Times giving an interview about his registration statement and going public. I thought, wow, I couldn't even believe he's doing the interview, but he started okay. He said, my investment bankers and my attorneys tell me I'm in this thing called the quiet time or cooling off period, and I'm not allowed to comment on the prospects of this issue, my issue. And then he said, but whoa, wait till I get all this green ammunition, man. I got the first mover initiative. Watch out, here I come. I go, whoa. No, the SEC said, hey, we're going to extend your cooling off period because we think you were hyping your deal.
Right.
So we can't do anything other than those things in the cooling off period. Now, by the indication of interest, by the way, we're going to know whether or not we have a hot issue, not a test term,
Right.
IPO, instant profit opportunity, not a test one, or we have a sticky deal. You
Yeah.
know whether we're going to be worried about uh,
Right.
holding IPO allocations to restricted persons, or whether we're going to be worried about stabilization. So we're going to have a window of pricing and kind of know from the indication of interest where we're at on that window. Now, the SEC is God, and state administrators think they are. And so that means state administrators, we're going to have to coordinate. Blue sky means state laws. And so, you got to make sure that, retail investors are protected on two levels, federal SEC, state level, the state administrators. So at the same time that we're making our registration statement with the SEC, We're also going to coordinate with the state administrator in any state we want to sell it. If we don't coordinate, then we can't sell it in that state.
Right.
Due diligence, we need to make sure all the information is truthful and relevant, not false and misleading. Most importantly, that we have made no omissions of material facts.
Yeah.
I saw a broker being interviewed, and they asked him why he didn't tell this information to the customer. He said, "I thought I'd lose the sale. I can't think of a worse answer." I'm
Right.
supposed to say, "Hey, Heath, it might, alter your investment decision, but something you ought to know." All right. So that's the biggest sin we can commit in the securities industry is making omissions of material facts. By the way, if I'm trying to stay out of trouble, I would say, well, I didn't think it was a material fact, and that's why I didn't disclose it. So here's our underwriting phases by way of review. We said we're going to do this. Boom. Here's the process. Now,
Yep.
once it's effective, it's going to be trading in the secondary market. The two major market centers are New York and NASDAQ. And as part of this process, they're going to have the issuer is going to have a beauty contest and say, New York will come say why you should trade on New York. NASDAQ will come talk to you about why you should be a NASDAQ security. I kind of find it, Heath, interesting that every investment banking firm I know of, when they take a company public, say, hey, you should be NASDAQ, we'll be one of your market makers. But not one of them has their own securities trading on NASDAQ. All of them are listed securities. I think they don't want to have people who have inventory in their securities. They would prefer to go to that model where there's this. No, you miss out on the IPO allocation. So now
Right.
the trading NASDAQ, it's trading New York. And you say, hey, Dean, no problem, big deal. I missed out on the IPO allocation. I get it. Go into the secondary market and buy me 1,000 shares in my margin account. I say, so Heath, you want to pay part of the purchase price? You want us to lend you the balance? You say yes. I say, well, Heath, how long ago did it go public? And you say, it
Has
doesn't.
to be within 30 days, right?
Excellent. Excellent. So no margin
For 30 days from
for
effective.
30 days from the
Yeah.
effect. You're going to have to pay in full.
Yeah, they can buy it, but for margin accounts, it
You're going
has
to
to be
pay by
30 days.
cash. Now,
Right.
I don't want to cloud your mind too much, but it's
Yeah,
the
no, I
account number. It's just type one and type two. So,
right.
do you want to do this in your cash account, Heath? You want to do this in your margin account? That's a typical conversation.
Yep.
Here, you say, I want to do it in my margin account. In certain circumstances, I say no can do. Right. This also means you can't buy an open-end mutual fund on margin, right? Because an open-end mutual fund, same thing as issuing new shares.
Right.
Right.
Constantly.
Yeah. But if you've had it 30 days fully paid for, bring it on down. We'll lend you money against it, right? We'll take your name off the account and put the broker dealer names on. As I told you, what we can do versus what we can do. I told you about the guy who, during the cooling off period, quiet time, violated that. Do you know what that's called? A violation?
What the actual violation is called, I
Yeah,
do know.
yeah, I like this one. It's kind of fun. Are you familiar with Oklahoma and the Sooners?
Yes.
The reason they're called the Sooners is because, they were going to shoot the gun off and you were going to go homestead your 40 acres. And so you had picked out a spot.
Yeah.
And when you get there, I'm already sitting there. I got
Right.
set up and I go, well, Heath, you weren't foolish enough to wait for the gun to go off, were you? That was kind of foolish on your part. I've been here overnight. I already got my 40 staked. And so that's where the term sooner comes. Our business, the guy I told you, the CEO, what he was
Yep.
doing is gun jumping. He's getting ahead of himself in terms of this process. So a violation of this, I would know, is called gun jumping.
There's an old movie with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman or something like that. At the very end, they like try and stake their own land or something like that.
Oh, really? Well, there you go. I didn't know that. I'll have to
Well,
Google.
and the gun jumpers get shot by the guys with the long rifles.
Well, there you go. Well, yes.
So,
Yeah, got to be a little careful. I hear that it's not about shooting each other. I told you I'm off grid, Heath, and I'm mainly a city guy, and
yeah.
I moved from Las Vegas here. I just finished up. I'm here. This is my first full month, but I had the sensibilities are much different. But I had a friend of mine. He was telling me he had a safe deposit box. I was kind of laughing. I go, "What do you have in your safe deposit box?" I can't even imagine. He goes, "Well, Dean, what about all your fine watches and stuff?" I said, "Well, I have a safe." And then I said, "I have a pistol, at the door." And
Right.
I had taken a little back. He goes, "Well, would you shoot somebody?" I go, "Well, yeah, probably would."
Yeah,
Hey,
situation's
I'm not
right.
unique out here. Everybody around here is armed. They all have guns. You got to be a
Yeah.
little careful. When I first got out here, I thought, because I'm not from places where people are wearing firearms. And I said, "Oh,
Right.
for your service." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you're a police officer, right?" He goes, "No." I said, "No, I said, well, it's not loaded, is it?" He goes, "Well, it wouldn't do any good if it wasn't loaded." So,
Wasn't loaded. Right.
yeah, my buddy's wife, she carries a pistol. I'm like, you know, Annie Oakley. We talked about this. This is again the whole point here is so you can make an informed decision, right? And I told you about the SEC disclaimer,
Yep.
right? Regulation of new issues, the final prospectus, pricing. We talked about delivery to purchasers. We talked about the SEC disclaimer. The final prospectus will have the offering price. We talked about that. All right. A, B, C, D. Depending on what they're asking you will depend on the appropriate response.
Right.
I think of it again in kind of the new car scenario. When I get a new car, I get a warranty. And when you buy
Yep.
a used car, there's typically no warranty, but there might be a circumstance in which the vehicle is slightly used and the warranty may transfer. Like the car dealer says, "Dean, this is a demo. I was the guy driving it around and, it's slightly used." Now, if we're doing a blank check or SPAC, so this is how Truth Social went public. Truth Social went public through the use of a blank check or a SPAC. What the bankers did was raise the money first and then said, once we raise the money, we're going to go find a target. And we're going to do a reverse merger of the private company into the public shell. So, Trump Digital Media was a private company, and then it was merged into the shell. Now,
Yep.
it's hard to value these SPACs. And so the public offering price on SPAC is going to be $10. And so, that's just the standard thing for a SPAC or blank check. Blank check means we're not telling you what we're doing with the money. We're going to go find the opportunity. Now, if we don't find the opportunity, then we're going to have to refund everybody's money.
Right.
That's typically 2 years, and True Social had to get a couple extensions here. Okay, so if you buy this SPAC or blank check company in the secondary market, secondary purchasers of a stock that has never previously sold in a registration statement, we should be thinking here blank check SPAC. Our entitled
Okay.
prospectus is 90 days from the effective date. 90 days from the effective date. All right, so it's not a blank check. It's not a SPAC. It's a stock that is going to be, has never been registered, but it is going to be registered on, I think maybe it's Kohler. Maybe I can talk the Kohler family into taking Kohler public. I doubt it, but they make
Right.
beautiful bathroom fixtures. So it's kind of a ridiculous, but I built a soft grid place and I have a cabin with a Kohler fixture that belongs in a mansion. And my contractor kind of laughed at me. I said, "Nick, I like those Kohler fixtures. I might be skimping on some things, but not that drone. I'm gonna have a big
Right.
boy, toilet." Anyways, if
Oh
I
yeah.
get the Kohlers to go public, they could meet any listing requirement of either New York or NASDAQ. And now we're saying our secondary purchaser is going to be entitled to a prospectus. The answer here is yes, because again, we're not going to allow the underwriters to publish research on the companies they're underwriting because we know what they would say. They're going to say it's a buy, and then you wouldn't read the prospectus. So, a couple of test questions here. Underwriters are not allowed to publish research on a company they're taking public. So that means it makes sense that there's not going to be a whole lot of information available. There
Right.
might be somebody who actually publishes a research report. That would be wonderful. Anyway, so this would be 25 days. So a secondary purchaser of an IPO for a NASDAQ New York stock would be entitled prospectus 25 days. Now, in my blank check example, and in fact, as a banker, when I do the IPO, I'm typically going to say, you know what, we might want to come back and raise some more money. We might want to do an additional public offering. We might want to do a follow on.
Like pull down a shelf registration of some kind?
Exactly right. So now be careful. If this is a shelf that we're pulling down for a blank check or a SPAC, it's going to be 40 days. It's
Okay,
not 40 days if it's a follow on for NASDAQ or New York, right? Because we assume when we're doing the follow on that, there's lots of information now available, research
right.
covering that kind of thing. And then here we go, 0 days, right? Reporting companies is synonymous with public company. And so this is a company that's filing 310Qs with the SEC, quarterly reports, filing an annual report, and they would have zero because, again, the idea is the information is available for
I mean,
perspective.
that'd be like your mutual funds and stuff like that, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would think here it'd be my Kohler example. So
Okay.
Kohler does their IPO. Your point about the shelf. Um, there's two versions of a shelf registration. So again, as a banker, I say to Kohler, I say to the issuer, I say, hey, listen, we're not going public because we need money. I get it, but it's better to have the securities registered on the shelf at the SEC and not need them than need them and not have them. And
Yeah.
so these are shares that are authorized but have not been issued, but we have registered them. I think a good example of this would be Disney. Disney paid for Fox by taking down the shelf, your term, right? They take down their shelf and now they issue those shares. Now, if you're not a well-known seasoned issuer of securities, your shelf is only good for two and it's not immediately effective.
Right.
But if you are a wixie, a well-known seasoned issuer of securities like Disney, then your shelf is three.
Agree.
As
Yep.
distinction, it's immediately effective. You don't have to wait for anybody to, tell you to go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that might be, those three might be something I got a little caught up on. I thought I had like a pretty good handle on
Yeah,
the
well,
data.
remember when you miss these questions or the QIDs, part of the process is just missing them. I did tell you best efforts. Investment banker is acting as an agent.
Hmm.
And we can do all or none. And my example was a $5 million all or none.
Right.
Now, a lot of us would like to expand the deal. And so my question is, how much can we expand a deal? We call this the Green Shoe because the Green Shoe Corporation was the first company to actually do this. We have the ability to expand the deal. If we exercise our green shoe, so let's say I have a good customer, you know, Fidelity, Principal, T Row, whoever.
Hmm.
And let's say that Fidelity says, Dean, how much of the stock did you give to T Row? And I say I gave 5 million shares to T Row. And Fidelity says we want twice that. Fidelity's kind of notorious for kind of pushing their weight around. And I say, well, I don't have that stock to give you. I mean, I'm sorry, what can I tell you? That's not what I want to say.
Right. You can
But
do 50%, right?
here you go. That's exactly right. And so I say, well, I have a green show. Can I exercise it? The test question is 15%. What I'm going to do in that example, Heath, is I'm going to short that stock to Fidelity. And then the way I'm going to cover is by exercising the green shoe. Now, the test question here is I can't be shorting the stock to profit from the stock going down, right? I'm shorting the stock to fulfill a customer order and
Right.
the green shoe, right? So you nailed it. We talked about firm commitment underwritings. We said, how does that work? All right. You said you had a pretty good handle on this. So let's see if you can do it. Your choices are going to be a safe harbor, a firm commitment, a best efforts, a Rule 147, a Reg A, whatever the case may be. So an investment banker sells the public on behalf of the issuer. Is that the best efforts or firm commitment?
If it's on behalf of the issuer, it's a firm commitment.
Well, be careful. It says
Yep.
sells to the public on behalf. So I'm acting as an agent to the issuer.
And that would be best efforts then.
And there you go, chance to redeem yourself. Underwriter sells an IPO from its own inventory. Here you go.
Firm commitment.
Yeah, you're buying it from the syndicate. Okay,
Yeah.
well, the safe harbors exempt transactions under 33 is called Reg A. That is not Bob Marley music. And under Reg A, I have two tiers. I have tier one, and
Yep.
I
Tier
have,
one, tier two. Yep.
yeah, and I can raise up to 20 million under tier one, 75 million under tier two. So we get
Yep.
Reg A here.
And no more than what, was it 12.5 million in the last preceding months and then 22
Yeah,
million?
if you get tested on the difference on tier two, it's going to be that the issuer has to have audited financial statements
Yeah.
and there is a suitability to the investment. We can't let you put more than 10% of your net worth into the deal.
Right. Right.
All right. Sierra Verde Coffee offers shares exclusively to residents of its home state.
Ah, 147.
You claim to have expertise, and it looks like you're proving it. Little Gem Corp offers shares exclusively to accredited investors.
506B, C? It's
You tell me. You
well,
tell me.
I don't know if it's B or C because I can't remember if it's 506A and
I
B or
love it. So as
506B
we
and
said,
C.
so Heath, we got a week to go, and as your tutor, here's what I'm pleased with. It seems like this is all up in your brain housing group.
Yeah,
Now we just got to work on delineating it. So you're on the right track. You were correct to tell me, Dean, there are two versions of a Reg D private placement.
correct.
There's two. There's 506B
And C.
and
There we go.
506B because it says exclusively to accredited investors.
Right.
That's 506C.
Right.
506B, okay, now let's see if it's still up there now that we've kind of, compartmentalized hopefully a little bit.
Yep.
506B, I can have up to how many non
35 non-accredited investors. No, and no advertising.
There you go. Excellent, right? So it's up there, and but now by the way, it'll be easier because I'm asking you to pull it out of the stratosphere and there'd be a question in
Right.
front to kind of look at.
Right.
All right, so be careful. They love to torment you on documents, right? And so the
Yeah.
underwriting agreement is between the issuer and the syndicate, right? In my example, this is the underwriting agreement between Facebook and the syndicate. What governs our relationship as a syndicate is what's called the syndicate letter, right? The syndicate letter governs our relationship. That's whether it's Eastern or Western, what you're going to take down, you know,
Mhm.
breaking syndicate, all that kind of stuff. And then we said that the syndicate members may or may not decide to build a selling group, build their bracket, it's called. And if they're having a selling group, we said very important to know selling group members never liable for
Right.
unsold securities, right? Never, ever, ever.
That's something that I would not have recognized if we wouldn't have discussed that today.
Well, that's testable, very testable. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. So
if you want to be at risk or not be at risk, I mean,
right.
you make more money taking the risk, but hey,
Right.
I was reading. I do a book club and I try and pick out titles that I think would be a good read, but also maybe reflect some of the test. And so the book that we are reading this month is called She Wolves, and it's about ladies in the securities industry. But for Heath, for me, it was kind of like a gallery of the rogues in our business, people from years ago. And I feel like I'm kind of old. And, I kind of think that the person who wrote the book didn't kind of, where are they now? Like Ivan Boesky and Jeffrey
Right.
Epstein. So
Right.
there's some people like that, but when you're historically looking at that, our business, yeah, I mean, the selling group members are never reliable, and again, you got to take risks to make money, and
Yep.
comfortable with that. Maybe you're not, but we had a firm called Drexel Burnham Lambert, and the guy there was Mike Milken, and Drexel was notorious for not forming a syndicate. Firm commitment. Mike Milken would give you letters, standby letters saying, we're going to raise you $2 billion. You could literally take that to the bank and borrow against it. That's how good his firm commitment standby letter was. And
Wow.
he was
That's
getting like 30 million bucks for just hitting his word processor. Say, Heath, 30 million bucks, and here you go. Here's your letter from Mike saying that I can raise this money for you. Wow.
wow.
Anyways, long story short, he showed up in there, and I was joking about Drexel that, they made no friends. And then when they had a glitch if you're a member in good standing of our club, we usually will find somebody to rescue you. But if you're not, then
Right.
whether it's Drexel or Lehman Brothers or bye bye, see ya.
Yeah.
Didn't want to be you, right? So I was thinking that. By the way, then we name rules after you sometimes, like the Drexel rule, right? The
Okay.
Drexel rule
Yeah.
is how much you can draw from a broker dealer. I told you that was a test question. This final settlement of syndicate, that 90 days is a test question.
90 days. Yep. Yep.
Selling group formation, we do that after the registration statement. We have the selling group agreement. Settlement of syndicate expenses, very testable. I told you we have to give you an item list of expenses.
Yep.
It's the test question isn't that miscellaneous costs may not be disproportionately large. That's not the test question. The test question, as I told you, is that if we have that category and a syndicate member requests us to break it out, then we got to break it out. I got
Right.
exactly where that money went.
Yep.
Very important here. So here again, we said that we know what you would publish, whether it be a buy or sell recommendation on a company you're taking public. And so we have prohibitions against publishing research as a
Yep.
syndicate member. And so these are some of those prohibitions. So if you're not participating in the underwriting, now I haven't quite finished the She-Wolf's book. And, I'm also, while I'm reading it, thinking of all the ladies that I would have used as these role models for, ladies breaking through in the securities industry. And I don't know, maybe she's going to show up in one of the last chapters, but one of our legendary ladies is Mary Meeker. Mary Meeker was in charge of research at Morgan Stanley. And there was a banker at Morgan Stanley named Frank Cotrone, and Frank left to go to Credit Suisse. And when Amazon went public, did their IPO, Morgan Stanley was not in the syndicate. And we know everybody in the industry wants to know what Mary thinks about this because she was known as Queen of the Net, the internet. So everybody wants to see what she says about Amazon. So in my example, Morgan Stanley is not participating in the IPO of Amazon.
Hmm.
Morgan Stanley can publish research if it's in the normal course of their business. It is. She covers the internet.
Yep.
And then test point, no compensation. So Mary Meeker wrote a research report and said that she thinks it's a strong buy at the IPO price. Woo! What would you rather read, a prospectus or a research report from Mary Meeker? A research report. Now,
Right.
we did not
100%.
find out that there was some quid pro quo from Credit Suisse to get Morgan Stanley to publish that research, right? So that's the test question.
Right.
Okay, so we've taken the company public. We're now covering it. So now we're doing a follow-on, right? Or we're doing something. Now, the next question here is what is a non-equivalent security? Morgan Stanley is the investment banker for Tesla, and Morgan Stanley sells billions of dollars in securities for Tesla. We were looking at the income statement of Tesla. We would see tens of billions of dollars that don't come from selling cars. We would find tens of billions of dollars that come from selling securities. Nothing wrong with that. And I said,
Right.
Morgan Stanley is the banker. So when Tesla needs to sell stock or bonds, they call Morgan Stanley. Now, non-equivalent securities would be the equity versus the debt. So we can, at Morgan Stanley, sell the stock and then publish research on how we think it's going to help the credit rating of the bonds because those are non-equivalent. Or
Right.
we could sell the bonds and publish research on the stock and talk about how the leverage of the bonds is going to affect the common stock. That's fine. Now on
Can
the test,
those be paid for? Or does research always have to go unpaid?
well, unpaid, we can't be paid by the issuer.
Or compensated, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we can sell our research, but it's got to be to you know they're called the buy side hedge funds and mutual
Okay.
funds. We can sell it. We just need to disclose it. I get the test question will be if I'm offering it for free, then it definitely has to be free, right? If I offer you
Right.
complimentary research, no bait and switch, so to speak, right?
Right.
Okay, now on the test, you got to believe in human depravity and original sin. And then, we're all kind of clever men and women. And then what I might want to do is talk about the convertible and be talking about the conversion price. And a discussion about the conversion price of convertible is really a discussion about the stock price.
Right.
And so convertible debt is not considered non-equivalent, right?
I
So
think, yeah,
convertible
yeah,
debt, I can't be underwriting convertible debt, publish, research on the equity.
right.
Well, follow on. So now we're talking about taking down the shelf. We're doing a follow on. Distribution participants can publish research on an actively traded security. Now, that phraseology is important. I'm not going to ask you what the definition is, but for just our own edification, we need to know, okay, actively traded securities. Actively traded securities are harder to manipulate. You know, thinly traded securities are easier to manipulate.
Yeah.
So every once in a while I'll be reading of a story about somebody who's trying to corner some market and something. I go, wow, that, if I were trying to corner some market, I would probably pick something a little smaller who I'm trying to manipulate. All right. So again, the idea here is that you are covering the stock already, right? So in my example, I'm covering uh, uh, restaurants in the restaurant industry, and now In-N-Out Burger is going public, or Panda Express is going public. They're privately held. Now they're going public. They're doing a follow-on. And I've been covering every quarter. I give you my updates on my recommendations within the fast food, I don't know what they call it, adult, casual, whatever. And
Yeah.
I have a buy, neutral, sell, whatever the case may be. So I have the recommendation in this table. Can I continue to cover it? The answer is yes when we're doing the follow-on. The test question is I can't upgrade it from buy to strong buy. I can't,
Gotcha.
I got to leave it the way it says, and I can't highlight it. So the test question here is the current recommendation can't be upgraded.
Got it.
So, this was for that follow-up.
Isn't there
You
something
brought this one
about,
up. Yeah, I'm
isn't
sorry. Go
there
ahead.
something about prospectus as well? Like maybe when you're, is it on the shelf registration to where if the price of it's going to change and you have to submit a new registration or something like that? Or am I just, my brain just going
I
blank?
think if you get a question like that, I kind of talked about this. If you're not a wixie,
Yeah.
your shelves are not immediately effective.
Right.
Your wixie, 3 years and you don't have to do anything. If it's 2 years, if your 2 year version, there you can't proceed
For
until
20.
it's effective. Yeah. I'm
Well,
avoiding using the
minimum. Well, right. A minimum of or whatever. Right.
yeah, yeah. I thought this was interesting. What a new world we live in. But Hertz was in bankruptcy and they had a shelf, and then it became a meme stock. And even though the everybody thought the common stock was going to be wiped out, and the stock was trading above that, they went to exercise their shelf, and the SEC said, "Wait a minute, really? You're going to be issuing equity securities while you're in bankruptcy?" Yeah.
Yeah.
Now they don't really tell them not to do it. They're just firing a shot across the bow, saying, you better give this some thought. That's not the use
Right.
of a shelf, right? But hey, since then, I guess things have become looser. Like I saw where, a lot of companies are now, hey, if you're foolish enough as a retail investor to pay the price, if like you're the CEO of AMC, you go, well, gee, why should the secondary market be having all the fun? If people want to pay, 60, $80, we'll sell it to you all day long for that.
Right. Right.
Syndicate group members may discount. You brought this up. It was testable. So you can tell you've done your work. I told you the follow on to that is once I break syndicate as the manager, every man or woman for themselves, every broker dealer for themselves, now you can do whatever you'd like. Right. So, if you want to reduce the price, but remember, I'm not worried about that because you're already taking a 30% haircut on the
Hmm.
security. So for that to end up being a loss, it would have to be a real big deal, right?
Yeah.
We told you the wixie, we said that 3 years is testable. The 3 years is testable. And we said it's immediately effective. Immediately effective. Access equals delivery. Test question here is we can't assume that our deal is, that we don't have to send you a prospectus. So if we tell the SEC that the way we plan on fulfilling our delivery of the prospectus is through disclosure to you where you can find it on the web, then there's no need to kill all these dead trees, right?
Right,
The last question here is we can't assume that. We have to make sure that we've said this is how we're going to do it.
right.
Fairness opinions, very testable. You know, X Holdings made an offer all cash 54.20 for Twitter. So we're going to need a fairness opinion from a lot of different parties, right? So
Yeah,
Twitter is going to hire an investment banking firm to do a fairness opinion. X Holdings is going to hire a banker to give a fairness opinion. And then any other persons might want to do it, like maybe the outside board. There could be more than one fairness opinion. But it has to be disclosed of a conflict of interest. For I told you, for example, Michael Grimes and Elon are pretty damn tight.
yep,
And Morgan Stanley has underwritten stocks and bonds for Tesla. They're going to be underwriting the bonds to take over X Holdings at 54.20 cash. They're going to sell about $10 billion worth of bonds. Morgan Stanley would have to disclose the relationship they already have to, in this case, X Holdings, which is Elon, and that they're being compensated for that, right? And then the test question is about this conflict of interest. And I see people get in trouble for this all the time, where they don't think it's a conflict, and then somebody says it is. It's just easier. Sunlight's the best disinfectant, right? Gun jumping, I told you about that.
yep.
That's what that's called. Corporate financing department. Well, who better than your peers to decide whether you're an investment banker or you're a Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort guy? I was at a bar one time. The guy told me he's an investment banker. I go, really? I mean, you don't strike me as an investment banker. I said, are you really sure you're not a penny stock scam guy? He goes, well, why would you say that? I said, well, you just told me that when you raise $10 million, that you get 10% of that, $1 million, you get $1 million in securities. And then I forget what you told me the other million, you're taking 30%. I don't know of anybody who's legitimate that does that.
Right,
If I raise $10 million max, test question 10%, right? So max would be
yep,
syndication fees would be a million of the 10. Throw in expenses, max would be 15. And
right,
you're telling me you're at twice that. So now the problem with some of these rules is we're dependent on the crooks to actually follow them, which is not likely. I doubt that Jordan Belfort, he's a real guy, Wolf of Wall Street, is going to file what he's supposed to file with the Committee on Corporate Finance, but, assuming he does. So equities convertible debts, including closed-end Reg A's, 147 offering DPPs and rights are exempt from filing the following. So we don't have to file with the Committee on Corporate Finance. Test question, the minute the manager files. So two major principles that run through the 24, two narrative threads, and God, I wish there were more. But one narrative thread you asked about me earlier, and we can do that maybe next session if you have some things you want to take care of. But in reporting trades, it's always the sell side that reports. So in secondary trading, the sell side is always responsible with one testable exception. The one testable exception, and it's very testable, is trace. The trade reporting and
which is
compliance
the,
engine.
yeah, which is a debt, which is
Yeah,
the bond. Okay, yeah,
that's right. That's the only thing that's dual side reporting. Right. So that's the only time both the buyer and the seller are reporting. Any other obligations are usually the seller, whether it's 10 seconds to the tape or,
right,
making the securities are in the proper deliverable form. I think it kind of makes sense because the seller is the more motivated party.
right,
In banking, it's always the manager that's responsible, right? So those are, who's responsible. So we're exempt from filing if it's non-convertible debt. We're exempt if it's mutual funds. Makes sense because mutual funds have their own max compensation under the Investment Company Act of 1940. You know what that is?
the U.S. Patriot Act.
8.5%.
Eight. Oh, you meant the
Eight and
percentage.
a
Yeah,
half.
8.5%. Yeah.
I don't know many mutual funds anymore that charge 8.5, but man, if you
No, they start at like 5.25 and then go from there.
yeah, five, eight,
I
eight,
yeah, I don't really sell them anymore. I mainly,
yeah,
mainly,
8.5. And I love that we call an 8.5% fund a full service fund, and your charges up at 8.5. You got to show them a lot of love. We don't have to do it for exempt offerings or exempt securities. When they sound the test exempt, they always mean governments and munis.
yep,
Whenever they say non-exempt, that means they're talking about a corporate security. The assumption is that in a private placement, a Reg D offering, the institutional investors that are involved and the accreditor investors that are involved have the resources to protect their own assets, their own interests, right? So that they would call me out if I was, didn't have the right things there. And then a lot of us just know that certain firms are legit. So,
Yeah,
I'm not on the committee on corporate finance, but I wouldn't make Goldman Sachs file. I wouldn't make Morgan Stanley file. I wouldn't make UBS file. I mean, Raymond James, the usual suspects, so to speak. The,
right.
the advantage of that, it would allow me to focus on who I should be trying to keep an eye on.
Yeah,
WeWork didn't make it through the registration process, and I thought it was kind of ridiculous that the issuer is blaming the underwriters for the failed IPO. And the underwriters were JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. I felt like saying, listen, that nobody
these
believed.
guys know what they're doing.
Yeah, I was going to say, nobody believes that they didn't know how to get you through this process. You were the ones who didn't come up with the remedies for the deficiency letters and all those other kind of things. Information filed by the manager, I told you that's testable.
Yep.
We file one business day filing the registration statement. We're going to say the amount of the spread and any stock options or warrants received. Now, if we're doing a partnership, there are a couple compensation questions about syndication fees in a partnership. I kind of gave you one. I said maximum syndication fees in a partnership DPP is 10%. And then did you catch? I said with expenses,
Right.
promotional expenses, that can be 5. And so that means our total would be 15%. So if I'm raising, $10 million, I got to put 8.5 million into whatever it is I'm saying I'm doing.
So
Right.
your expenses don't have to come out of the 10% fee. They can be added on top of it, but no
That,
more than a max of 5.
that's right. I was
Yeah.
raising money for a winery and my commission is 10%. So you invest, 10,000, 100,000 in that winery, my broker dealer gets 10,000. And then
Yep.
I say, I think it's still pretty lean, but I just took you up to the winery here and we did a due diligence tour and tasting. And as you know, we were drinking some nice wine and, that's not free. That's part of the expense.
Right.
So, in that deal, our expenses were like 2%. So that means
Right on.
$88,000 is actually, going into the winery.
Right.
I always get really bent when I see Schwab runs commercials about wineries as investment opportunity. Oh, hey, don't pick on our winery, right? All other items of value, any other inducements. One other thing, sometimes we do partnership roll-ups,
Yep.
and roll-ups. Like one of the deals I was involved in was called Del Taco Restaurant Properties. We did Del Taco Restaurant Properties 1, Del Taco Restaurant Properties 2. What we would do is raise, $8 to $12 million, buy all cash real estate and build Del Tacos. We did 4 syndications. These are very similar partnerships, and we're doing 4 different filings. And so we say, we should roll them up and get some economies of scale here. And so we hire somebody to roll this up and create from these 4 different syndications, one master limited partnership. Test question. The most compensation I can get for a roll up is 2%.
Okay.
So we're doing a roll up on a partnership. We're turning them all into one partnership. That's the max split.
Got it.
Now, this is one of the challenges I told you on 24, because there are questions that are judgment questions, right? And the way
Right.
to get you on a judgment question like this is, what I call the Sesame Street trick. One of these things is not like the.
Like,
So I
yeah.
just, the guy who told me he's taking down 3 of 10, I go, that's outrageous. So they're going to give you examples and say, which of the following would the corporate committee on finance find more problematic or a problem? And you just go through each of your answers, A, B, C, D. You go, oh, that sounds reasonable. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Oh my God, I wish. Woo, sounds unreasonable.
Right. I wish I could get that one. That's probably the
Yeah,
answer.
yeah. Freely transferable stock. Option warrants, these are the compensation they're going to be looking at to determine whether or not, you're getting unreasonable compensation. Options warrants with a life greater than 5 years, shares greater than 10% being offered. I told you that it's the same as the partnerships, basically. The threshold that usually is the trigger is this idea of 15.
Okay.
Now, most new issues are, between 7 or 8, but again, it's a kind of a subjective kind of a question.
Hmm.
Very testable. I say, man, Heath, it must be so cool to be in the banking business. You get first dibs on all those IPOs. I said, well, no, actually, it's a disadvantage.
Because I can't buy them.
I'm a restricted person. When they were interviewing Mary Meeker, I told you I thought for sure she was going to talk fondly about her days at Morgan Stanley, and I was shocked when they asked her about her days at Morgan Stanley, and she said, "I don't miss it at all." She goes, I'm a venture capital. I'm a general partner at Kleiner Perkins. I love this business so much better. It's so not regulated. My husband used to get mad because Morgan Stanley wouldn't let him do investments, and now we can do
Yep.
it. And I thought, man, if I was the Morgan Stanley compliance officer, I would say, "Ooh, I didn't realize she was that bent, about
Right.
the framework of, what I wouldn't let her do, right?" So restricted persons are going to be member firms and the employees. And remember the immediate family member. I think the way to get this, Heath, is up, down, sideways. Your
Yeah.
parents, parents-in-laws, up, down, your kids, your children, sideways, your siblings and siblings-in-law, right? Now, we have sometimes what we call undisclosed investment entities. So let's say this is a hedge fund. And let's say it's called Velocity Capital. And the guy who's running Velocity Capital is a guy named Andy Kessler. And it's formed as a partnership. He's the general partner and he has limited partners. And Andy Kessler used to write research. He was head of research for tech at Morgan Stanley. And now Morgan Stanley is doing an IPO, and I want to give an IPO allocation, or he requests an IPO allocation. So we call this an undisclosed investment entity. I don't actually know who these limited partners are. And so I say, hey, Andy, as an undisclosed investment entity, I need a representation letter from you that if I give you this IPO allocation, that it will not find its way into a restricted account,
There you go. Yeah.
right? And so this is called a representation letter. I should probably get this right out of the gate because, I have to have it on file 12 months. So the representation letter is the undisclosed investment entity assuring me that if I give him an IPO allocation, it's unlikely that Andy's going to tell me who his clients are because he thinks I might try and steal them. Right? You're probably right, right? So I'm not going to ask him. I'm saying, Andy, I'm not asking who your limited partners in your hedge fund are. What I'm asking is for a letter that if you make sure it won't go to somebody who's restricted. He says, well, Dean, I do manage money, as you know. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but there are Morgan Stanley employees who I've met over the years, and I am managing money for them. I say, okay. I say, well, do you have carve out procedures? In other words, we're not quite done yet that you can't have it. Do you have accounting such that if I give you the IPO allocation, you can assure me that those restricted persons are not going to participate?
Right.
He says, yeah, I do have carve out procedure. Okay, cool. One more point, Andy. I need you to have positive affirmative consent on this original letter. And what that means in plain English is he has to sign it. And I said, now, good news, Andy, we're only going to sign it once because every year I'm going to remind you that I'm holding this letter. And no news is good news. And the word for that is negative consent. Negative consent means I don't need to get a client signature.
Right.
I've got it once and that's sufficient. There we go. 5130, very testable. Uh, how about financially supported? What does that mean?
Oh man. I don't know, maybe someone living in your household that, I
Yeah, my
mean,
grandmother has
you're
passed away.
responsible for, right?
There you go. My grandmother has passed away, but before she did, I took care of her. She lived
Right.
on my property. I gave her money for bingo. And the idea here is instead of giving this IPO allocation to a client who can make some money, why not give it to my grandma so I can make her financially independent so I don't have to take care of her anymore? So
Right.
the trick here is if it's an aunt or an uncle or somebody who's not your immediate family member, but you're financially supporting, they slide back into the category of restricted person.
Right.
If restricted a person's owed 10% or more of the account can buy the new issue if they carve out. We talked about that.
Mhm.
That's 10%. And we talked about this representation letter, very testable. We
Yep.
said initially it's going to be positive affirmation, meaning you got to sign it. Then we said it's going to be negative consent. Orders from a conduit, the way I think of that, I don't know if it's helpful, Heath. I think of this as an undisclosed investment entity, meaning I don't know who's on the other side. Give you another example, Fisher Investments. I doubt Fisher Investments is going to tell me who they're going to give the stock to. And so it's fine. Can I still give this to Fisher Investments if I don't know who's actually going to get the allocation? The answer is yes, just as long as I have that representation letter.
Yep.
Issuer directed sales. This is a good thing. You want to eat your own cooking. So this is, the issuer says, Dean, I want to make sure my employees get some of the stock. Not a problem. Now we can't use this to avoid restricted persons. So I can't say, well, the issuer wanted me to have it. No, no. Standby purchasers. When indications of interest are low, the syndicate manager may sell to purchasers otherwise restricted because this is a good thing, right? This will help us support the stock. The test question, as always, has to be disclosed in the prospectus. And there's a 3-month lockup. This rule does not, 5130 doesn't apply to employees who are doing partnerships or mutual funds because there's no conflict there, right? Because your firm isn't an underwriter. So the rule doesn't apply.
Got it.
One other point I would tell you, the rule doesn't apply to our own broker dealer going public, right? So when Goldman Sachs went public, Goldman Sachs employees can have all they want. That's a good thing that they want to eat their.
Right.
And self
Yeah.
underwriting, the question about self underwriting is the employees can have the stock, they're not restricted. And then if you're a broker dealer going public, you'd have to hire an independent underwriter for the IPO price.
Yep.
Like Goldman Sachs example, they hired Lazard. And then when Lazard went public, they hired Goldman. All right, let's try a couple of practice questions. During the waiting period of a new securities registration, a registered rep would be allowed to,
C.
right on, good job. All right, well, I think that's a good place to leave it for today.
Sounds good.
And I will see you next week and come up with your Dean to-do list. You have my cell phone. You need
Yes.
me, you know where to find me.
Thank you, sir.
Okay,
Nice
you
meeting you.
bet. You bet.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
I like your
Bye-bye.
haircut, by the way. I wish I
Hey,
was, I wish I
thank
could do
you.
that. I just look at that and go, oh, I wish I could pull that off. I don't think I could pull it off. All right.
Appreciate that.
All
Take
right.
care.
I'll
All
see you
right.
next week.
Sounds good. Bye.
Whatever the next one is.